Morning, Brian.
Good. Yeah.
We would have been fine.
Okay, we have 10 o'clock.
I think it would have been fine.
Next item on our agenda is the public hearing for the proposed amendment to the Kossuth County zoning ordinance that addresses the regulation and restriction of the use of land for the transportation of hazardous liquid through hazardous liquid pipeline. Would there be a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion to open the public hearing? Roll call vote, please.
Plath,
Yes.
Jerks,
Yes.
Wactor,
Yes.
Nah,
Yes.
Stecker.
Yes. Public hearing is open. We do have a number of people, I'm sure, who would like to make comments, so we will work through those, as we go here. Please come up to the podium to address the board and try and keep your comments respectful and professional. Other than that, floor is open for anyone who would like to make comments. Start her out. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Grant Terry, I know you've seen me before. I'm a project manager with Summit Carbon Solutions. I'll keep it brief. I know there's probably some other folks here that have a few things they want to go through as well. Before we get started today, I guess first and foremost, want to state for Summit that we do oppose this ordinance. You know, the regulation of this pipeline per state is going to be regulated by the through the federal level by PHMSA, and then of course at the state level by the IUB, which I'm sure the majority of, if not everybody in this room, has been watching the IUB proceeding, which has concluded at this point. Now we're just waiting on that final, you know, whether or not they're going to allow us to have a permit or not. That being said, before you go into your discussion, I would just kind of point at some of the other counties. You know, I've been, you know, we follow pretty much everyone that we do impact here in the state. And I know that, you know, over whether it was last week or, you know, the past couple of weeks, there's been ordinance discussions in, you know, in Wright County and Emmett County and Page County. And I know that you guys are represented by Allers and Cooney, and I can't speak to any conversations that you've had with Tim on your own time, but I know that the tone with the other counties, and they've expressed this, it's available in their publicly available minutes on their websites, is that his recommendation was to hold off on a hazardous liquid pipeline ordinance, including setbacks, just based on, you know, the current standing with Judge Rose. That being said, just wanted to have that out there for your consideration before you deliberate today. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
I'm Dale Casey, concerned citizen. I live a half mile south where this pipeline's going, and I represent my landlord, Henry Schnockenberg. He's opposed against it also. He owns Life Farmer's ground. It'll be a half a mile and another quarter mile it'll be going through. And I just hope you board go with what the people want, and not what big business wants, because we're the ones that voted you in. So stick to the people.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Or next up, feel free.
Sandra Lubenbaugh, I'm a landowner. They oppose the ordinance. We oppose not getting a plume model. As a county supervisor, your duty is to protect and preserve the rights, privileges, and property of the county and of its residents, and to preserve, to improve peace, safety, health, and welfare, comfort, and convenience of its residents. You have asked Summit to provide plume models multiple times, and each time they refuse. Why? What are they hiding? With no plume model being provided by Summit, people affected have turned to the Aloha software for an idea of what will happen, which you have been provided and hopefully will review when considering this ordinance. One of the main reasons they advise for not releasing the plume bottle is security concerns. I'm confused at that because if you look at the docket at the Iowa Utility Board, there's maps out there of the county. You can see the county streets. Sometimes you can even see a map of where the houses and where the buildings are on that property and where the pipeline is with it, and I have a copy if you'd like it. In regards to the ordinance, I hope you support it. Do I think 2,500 or 3,000 feet is enough? No. But it is better than the 500 feet or less that this pipeline will be from my home and many others in the county.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
I'm Nancy Erickson. On October 3rd, 2023, Summit filed its dispersion analysis on the Iowa Utilities Board docket. However, they made the entire file confidential. If you look it up, it says one word, confidential. No one is allowed to see it. Summit has continuously argued that the IUB cannot deny or revise any part of their proposed project or route on the basis of safety, nor can the IUB request any documentation regarding safety. Summit filed these claims on the docket on November 10th, 2022. Also on November 10th, 2022, Wolf Carbon filed a brief claiming that the IUB does not have jurisdiction to request copies of a pipeline developer's emergency response plan, risk assessment, or discharge plume model. The IUB has caved into Summit's pressure and upheld these claims. On February 10th of this year, the IUB ruled in favor of the pipeline companies. They decided pipeline companies did not have to file a discharge plume model and risk assessment nor emergency response plan. Consequently, none of the Iowans who live, work, or go to school within the hazard levels identified by their dispersion analysis have been allowed to see it. They have been not notified about the threat to their safety and lives. Our emergency responders who are tasked with rescuing people in these areas have not had a chance to evaluate the information. In fact, the IUB has refused to allow Iowans in these hazard zones to participate in the hearing. People who live on acreages or work next to where the pipeline is going were not allowed to intervene or speak at the IUB hearing. Only those of us who have the pipeline that will be buried on their land have been allowed to speak. But even me, as a landowner, I have not been permitted to see Summit's dispersion modeling. This means there are people who live within a few hundred feet of the proposed route who will likely be unconscious within 1 minute and dead within 10 minutes. These people have not been given access to the information necessary to protect their life and the lives of their loved ones. Due to the fact that the IUB appears unwilling to allow safety to be an area of concern in the location of lethal CO2 pipelines, it is crucial for Kossuth County to pass an ordinance to protect our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Dave Wilden. We live near the Irvington Bridge. This proposed pipeline will come within 600 feet of our home. It will go right across two of the lots that we are attempting to develop. We just closed on another lot in our development in November. That lot sold for $150,000. So these two lots that pipeline will cross on are virtually unsellable, you might say. Who's going to buy a $150,000 lot and build this last home that got built? Their total cost when they're done is going to be $670,000 for the lot and the home. Who's going to build a home like that where there's a pipeline running underneath your ground if you allow them to do that? Plus that you know, in terms of, tax money that the county will collect. How much property tax money are they gonna be out if there'd be, well, just those 3 homes that are on that development now, each one of them is assessed at over $500,000 on the property tax collection on that. You figure that these 2 new lots, if no homes are built on those, what the county's gonna lose in property tax collections, plus income tax from the contractors that build the homes and the material and all that kind of stuff. Then the other thing is, I kind of calculated quite often when we were at those hearings down there in Fort Dodge, you know, each one of these people that are impacted by this are gonna have this narrow strip going across their land, and they're always talking just a few acres or whatever. Well, that, according to the card that Summit sent us, they're gonna be 100 feet wide. So that means that each acre that they cross is gonna, I can't remember that, I should have brought a sheet, I didn't realize you could testify at this, I should have brought the numbers on that. I think if I remember right, in Iowa, that will mean they're gonna tear up 8,400 acres of land to run that pipeline. And if they run it 2,000 miles like they're saying, that'll be 24,000 acres of land that they're gonna tear up. And a lot of that land will be prime farmland. And depending on, you know, who you listen to, a lot of them say it in 10 years, that land still won't be recovered from what it was. Well, there again, you're talking a lot of money in terms of the income loss from the farmers, the income loss from the government and the income tax they would collect on that. There's a lot of money involved there that's negative to the community as far as tax collection. The other thing that I figured out, and I should have brought my, like I said, I should have brought my, just in Kossuth County, which is 24 miles long, they're going to run, according to what we got, and earlier in a lot of these meetings, it seemed like you couldn't kind of pin them down as to what the size of that pipe would be. But I think as I understand it now, it's going to be a 24-inch pipe proposed to go across Kossuth County. Well, if those pipes come in 80-foot lengths, that's as long as you could probably haul down the highway, 40 foot or 80 foot. Every 80 foot, there's going to be a weld joint around a 24-inch pipe. That's 62 inches of weld every 80 feet. And I figured that out for, I don't remember all the numbers now on that, but for the total of the 2,000 miles, that figures out, if I recall right, 17 million inches of weld. Now you're telling me that the probability of not having a problem there somewhere down the line, that one of them welds isn't going to break? And you know, they're going to give you evidence where they've welded that. Well, under ideal laboratory conditions, that's not when it's going to be welded. It's going to be welded when it's real hot, when it's real cold, when it's rained, and they're working in the mud, and they're going to make 17 million inches of weld that's going to be no problem. I mean, just the probability of that. I'm not a mathematician, but I don't think you need to be a mathematician to realize that the chances of having a problem there sometime down the road are pretty damn high. There again, I said I wish I would have realized you could testify here. I've got a lot of other information that I've worked on over there. When I was down there at Fort Dodge, I testified for an hour and a half. So most of that information that I gave is in that record. There's a lot more information that I've calculated, you know, as far as the money part of it. The money part of it, it started out, this 45Q. When that law passed, they were going to get $30 per ton of CO2 that they sequestered there in North Dakota. and it was a 12-year deal. And at the end of 12 years, it was gonna go from $30 to $50 a ton. Well, when Biden passed this anti-inflation bill, he raised it from the get-go from $30 to $85. So the amount of money that you're talking about there that these people have got to try and ram this down our throat, it's unbelievable. It's like $12 billion if you figure out if they collect on what they say they're gonna do. $12 billion, that's $12,000 million. And us little people have to try and fight that money. You know, if you people don't help us, we're cooked. I guess that's all I got to say.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, you get to hear from her husband as well, Alan Lubenthal, concerned citizen. I want to reiterate what PHMSA decided in their Des Moines meeting. The responsibility for siting new carbon dioxide pipelines rests largely with the individual states and counties through which the pipelines will operate and is governed by state and local law. So irregardless of what you have heard or read or been told, you do have a responsibility to protect me and everyone else in this county from hazardous pipelines, as well as everything else that is proposed to go through this county. Each and every one of you. It may not be next to your home, or your home, or your home, or yours, or yours. Someday it will be. And now is the time to act to prevent it from happening again. Hopefully early enough to prevent it from happening this time. And if you have any questions about my concern and everyone else's along this pipeline, I am sure that everyone would be interested in sharing their opinions with you personally. And I invite you to come out to my home and sit at my table and listen to my concerns. Because if you ignore them, it's a grave concern for every citizen in this community. Unfortunately, majority of them do not have a voice. I do, and that's why I'm here. And if you don't act, guess what? You're going to hear it again. And it's going to be a lot worse next time. Thank you for your consideration, and please do what's right for the citizens of this county.
Thank you for your comments. Third time's a charm.
Yes, sir. My name is Rich Deal, and I live south of Algona. And I guess you could say we're kind of on the secondary route. And so last time I was at the meeting here at the courthouse, the Summit people said they aren't going to tell us what the plume study is. Roger, you asked, and they said no. And so I thought, well, okay, then that leaves it all up to us. And you hear the advertisements of see something, say something. I'm going to say something. As a roundhouse figure, as we keep hearing, the kill zone is about a half mile. You know, we're not going to wait 5-6 years for the most complete study to come out and say it's right about roughly half mile, more or less. And so let's take where I live. I live roughly a mile, a little over a mile from Algona, mile and a quarter. And on my road, a dead-end road, you turn off of 190th Street going south of Algona, you'll see a Pioneer sign that always identifies that. I counted 33 houses. And I just took a roundhouse figure of there's some retirees, singles, families, let's just say 90 to 100 people. And we would be trapped in that. Then I got thinking, you know, they can't even go from the hospital across that because, well, the plume would be there. And then I got to thinking, what about the motel there? And I stopped and talked to her. Name's Tina. She's her husband, I guess, they're from India. And we talked about during the summer, I'll see Hispanics mainly walking in town. They have no transportation. She said they cannot speak any English. And they would be helpless. Then this morning I called Billy Willing. I said, Billy, you have the maple syrup at the Smith's Woods. And do you realize they have between 400 to 600 fourth graders there? And my friends from Garrigan, congratulations on the football championship. They're my neighbors and friends. They usually take a third and fourth grade each. They skip every other year, but they take the whole class. They would lose a class down in that river valley, no matter where they put that pipeline. And so, you know, what are we gonna do? You know, the hard part for me is knowing the governor knows there's alternatives, and he said nothing. Depraved indifference, I don't really care, is what I got from that. We have legislators who on important days went out fundraising. We had one that they said just kind of hid in the office. So it really rests on us. Did anybody ever think what it would be like to wake up in the morning and find out a family died, a child died, a community? Did anybody ever think about that? I don't think so. Otherwise, I don't think we'd be here today. But it's up to you. And I'm just asking you just to do the right thing and show some courage. You know, we got a big God, don't we? You know, I think if he's for you, who's going to be against you? Let's just show the courage to go forward. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Matt Dornber, I'm sure you guys all know by now where I stand on this project. Just to give you a little review, Summit saying how they want to be open and transparent. 3 times I've had land agents in my yard wanting to make a proposal. Dollar figure was only discussed the last time they were there. The first 2 times my concerns were safety and drainage, and they didn't want to answer any of them questions. So then they'd send another land agent. Finally, the last time I told them, wasn't interested because they couldn't answer my questions. So then they turned to the conjoining landowner and now place that within 200 feet of my hog confinement building that I enter every day, at least once a day. There's other people there. I have a tenant on my farm place there within a half mile. Tenant, employee, however you want to word it. He has no say. He has no control. There's a lot of people here that aren't here today due to the time frame, their jobs, their location. They don't have an opportunity to speak. So I think it's important you guys consider this ordinance and do what's right for the county. If Summit was open and transparent, you'd have the plume model study in front of you. They're not willing to do that. And to touch on what Rich just said, some of you have kids that are already grown up and adults. Some of you are just starting families. It's not just the children in Algona that go to Smith Wildlife. It's Humboldt, Twin Rivers, North Union. They're from everywhere. This county has shown great strength in gathering around tragedy when it happens, but you as a board have the opportunity to try to prevent that by passing this ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
Dave Wilden again, I got one more thing that I just now thought of. Their proposal to run this pipeline west of us on Bob Faber's farmland is gonna run that pipeline, I didn't measure it, but I'm gonna guess 200 to 300 feet away from where they manufacture Countryside barbecue sauce. And I'm just kind of wondering, is that some kind of a precedent you want to set, that you're going to let something like that run that close to a food production facility? That Countryside barbecue sauce, if you're not familiar with it, it's in all the grocery stores, Hy-Vee and Fairway all over the state. And they have trucks pull in there with all the ingredients that they use to manufacture this. Besides that, there's another new business there that Ron Beatty has at G-Force Customs, where they redo cars. And you're talking a multi-million-dollar business. I talked to one fellow that had a car in there that when they got done with it, the bill was $140,000. So you're gonna jeopardize a business like that too, that's paying property taxes, income taxes, It just doesn't make any good sense to me.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to share some comments?
A possible impact of the pipeline
Lyle.
on landowners.
Lyle, can you introduce yourself quick?
Sure, Lyle Prunty, Algona. A possible impact of the pipeline or putting the pipeline in on landowners is that, my understanding, it's possible that the fluid flowing through there may be at somewhat elevated temperature, which means in the winter you may end up with land that doesn't freeze as much, which I think in some instances in oil pipelines and other places that has caused people some concern. So it's just something that I guess it's minor compared to some of the other things in a way, but it's an aspect that people may want to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Greg Kramer, my house sits approximately within 750 feet of the proposed pipeline. It is not on my property, so nothing's been said to me. I operate several businesses off my property. One is a horse boarding, where I have young children that come out and ride occasionally. So I have a concern about that. I also run a repair business out there where I have customers that come to my place periodically to drop equipment off and pick it up. I oppose this pipeline. My aunt lives across the road, has done a number of research, so I mean, I don't know everything that's going on, but I know she does to the full extent. I would hope you guys would support the members of this county and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh.
I'm Pat Rothman, Algona. I live just south of Riches, within less than a mile from the proposed pipeline. We've been kept in the dark on this, so I'm not sure what. But I'm just concerned with health issues, because I have health issues. And if there's a leak, I'd just be dead in seconds. So I just oppose this. I know Rich and all these guys, the farmers, are true husbands of the land, and they really value the land. So again, I'm opposed to this.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this, and I brought this before, but I think it's always good to see a visual. You know, this is 8-inch, the valves, they eventually had to shut this down, experimental. They're having problems with it. It would be, 24 would be 6 times worse than that. And it's not just the cloud itself, it's the underneath part that goes out farther. So I mean, this is really I want you to see with your eyes what we're talking about. And I think this really hits home. And I did a little bit of my own research too, because they said, well, we're gonna do extra valving, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And when I found out, research showed there is no safe valves. They're all susceptible. So the idea that we're gonna put in an extra couple actually makes it even worse, because what they're doing is they're pushing it to places it doesn't belong in itself. The security actually makes it even worse, because they said there's no valves that couldn't be compromised. And I think we do have to. They mentioned terrorism. What would it be like to have one of these go off someplace? What would it be like for our community to all of a sudden get a phone call that there's one going to go off? We've never talked about this. We've never talked about what would this do to the ethanol industry if all of a sudden there were some people killed. Does that shut down their idea of this, when they could all along go into in-house with these ethanol plants and making methanol be more profitable? I think it's a whole big thing here, but I do want to point out that it would be 6 times worse than this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to make comments?
Alan Casey again. He said gate valve. I just found out a few weeks ago because my cousin farmed a farm beside mine up on the ridge. which is solid rocks. And they were gonna put the gate valve on top of their ground, but they were opposed of it, so they put it on the ground to the west of there, which the guy was gonna let them go through. But you got Terwilligers, Gardners, Divises, the other one, Shannon up the road, Runenberg, Munson, Canes, the whole town of Irvington. And then you got Nutrient Ag. How many people this time of year at Nutrient Ag? There's a lot of people there. There's a lot of customers, a lot of workers. And that gate valve's gonna be a half mile basically from all of us. And I just hope that you choose right.
Thank you. Any other comments?
There are 7 written comments that I put in your board folders, just want to make sure you saw those.
Do you want me to speak?
Sure, feel free.
On December 22nd, the Kossuth County Board of Supervisors requested the Kossuth County Planning and Zoning Commission to review and evaluate an ordinance amending various sections of the Kossuth County zoning ordinance for the purpose of regulating and restricting the use of land for the transport of hazardous liquid through a hazardous liquid pipeline. On February 27, 2023, the Kossuth County Planning and Zoning Commission held a properly noticed public hearing to receive comments about the proposed ordinance. On April 18, 2023, the Kossuth County Planning and Zoning Commission reported to the Kossuth County Board of Supervisors regarding a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance that addresses the regulation and restriction of the use of land for the transport of hazardous liquid through hazardous liquid pipelines, and it was presented to the Kossuth County Board of Supervisors. On November 8, 2023, the Board of Supervisors, November 2, 2023, the Board of Supervisors set a public hearing for today. On November 8, the notice of public hearing and the proposed ordinance was published in the Bancroft Register and the Sway City Herald. On November 9, 2023, the notice and the public hearing was published in the Kossuth County Advance. The first page of the notice of the public hearing was on our bulletin boards in the courthouse, and that directed people who were reading to the website, and there was a notice, and the proposed ordinance was on our website and is on our website. We have received emails and letters, and I will go ahead and read those. The first one is from Joel Gustafson, and he is the Vice President of Tax for Summit Carbon Solutions. I am writing to let you know about the estimated property taxes that Summit Carbon Solutions will be paying to Kossuth County each year. We think it's essential for everyone to understand how our operations will benefit the community. Here's a simple breakdown. Total each year, we will be paying about $950,000 in property taxes to Kossuth County every year. To break it down even further, for local schools, most of this, about $449,000, will go to schools. Algona and West Bend Mallard school districts will get the funds. If you'd like, I can tell you exactly how much each school will get. For colleges, about $52,000 will go to local colleges, including Iowa Lakes Community College. For the county, about $398,000 will go to the county, which they can use at their discretion. For townships, the rest, which is $16,000, will be split among the different townships in the county. If you're curious, I can share which townships will get what. We believe our contribution will help schools improve the area and support the local townships. If you have any questions or need more info, just let us know. Thank you for your time. We did receive an email from Sheila Pedersen-Eller. Dear Kossuth County Supervisors, I encourage the county to enact an ordinance regarding hazardous liquid pipelines. As a landowner in Kossuth County facing the threat of my property being taken by eminent domain from a private company, this issue could not be of higher importance. I fully support all efforts by the county to restrict and regulate hazardous liquid pipelines. We know the few existing regulations for carbon pipelines are inadequate. The Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration is currently in the process of updating guidelines for that very reason. As it stands, under existing rules, a carbon pipeline could be installed as little as 50 feet from your home. The length of a semi-truck trailer is all that is legally required to stand between you and a highly pressurized pipeline capable of emitting a lethal plume of carbon dioxide. The proposed ordinance provides a much improved setback distance, decreasing the potential consequences of a rupture or leak of a pipeline. We know that carbon capture pipelines are being proposed to take advantage of bad federal policy. These projects do not exist for the good of the public, nor will they preserve Iowa's ethanol industry or play a role in addressing climate change, as proponents claim. Rather, they exist in order for a few wealthy investors to make a large profit from our tax dollars by administering fees on the local level. The ordinance ensures our community retains some of the funds that a pipeline company would otherwise extract. We also know that county supervisors play an integral role, in the permitting and construction process. You have the power to rein in any corporation hoping to route a carbon pipeline through the county. Your leadership matters on this issue. 7 counties across Iowa have passed ordinances to ensure the rights of their citizens come before the greed of carbon pipeline companies. I urge you to do the same. While certain pipeline companies have threatened to sue counties that enact ordinances, this is an empty threat. No law expressly forbids counties from suggesting pipeline companies follow additional protocols. Should an intimidation lawsuit be filed, the county can simply rescind the ordinance, making such a lawsuit moot, should they not wish to pursue legal action. The only risk in this situation are the harms facing our community if the supervisors fail to act. Please stand with landowners and protect our land from greedy, unethical private company. Property rights matter in the United States of America. Freedom and property rights are inseparable. Please protect the land, the people, and the future of Kossuth County by passing the proposed ordinance. Please protect our rights as property owners. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And it does ask if they would let them know if they received the email, and I believe Tammy did reply back to that.
Who was that from?
That was from Dr. Sheila Peterson-Eller.
Okay.
Dr. Eller again asked to share a document with the Kossuth County Board of Supervisors and myself. I believe the board has this document. It is a CO2 pipeline checklist for county supervisors, commissioners, and suggestions. Would the board like me to read the document? Or just keep it on file?
We have it.
I
I believe
think
you have it, yes.
having it on file would be good.
Received a email from Jerry Peterson, November 14th. I am a landowner in Kossuth County. I do not want a CO2 pipeline go through the Peterson farm. I object to the county not having a public meeting on this hazardous liquid pipeline. I do not like the threat of my property being taken by eminent domain. The company Summit is not a nonprofit. The company is making money off the landowners in Iowa and Kossuth County. Please protect the land and people and the future of Kossuth County by passing the proposed ordinance. Please protect our land from greedy, unethical private company. Please protest our right as property owners. Your leadership matters on this issue. Thank you for doing your duty as Kossuth County supervisors by listening to the people of Kossuth County. Geraldine Peterson, landowner. This is an email again from Doug Schwartz. In the event of a carbon pipeline rupture or leak, an explosive plume of CO2 gas can emerge, odorless and colorless. It is an asphyxiant that can suffocate all living beings, humans and animals. The CO2 can prevent combustion vehicles from starting, so no one will be able to escape. CO2 can displace oxygen in the air when released in large quantities, posing a risk to human health and safety. Have you ever seen a tire blow out on a vehicle and how the driver can immediately lose control and crash? The pressure in your car tires is only 30 to 40 pounds per square inch. Now think about the carbon pipelines having a pressure of 2,100 PSI, pounds per square inch, just 4 to 5 feet below the ground. CO2 pipelines are operated at high pressures, which will greatly amplify the consequences of any rupture. Please vote yes on the pipeline ordinance. Please vote yes on setbacks to protect human lives. Doug Schwartz. This is from Julie Baker. Dear Kossuth County Board Supervisors, we received this November 20. Hi, my name is Julie Baker, and I live at the Southdale Homeowners Association Housing Development, southwest of Algona. Our housing development is approximately a couple of miles north of the proposed CO2 pipeline coming through east to west by the G-Force business. I am emailing the board today to encourage them to adopt all the carbon pipeline zoning ordinances as proposed. As a board of supervisors, it is your civil duty, as voted upon by the citizens of Kossuth County, to protect them, especially Algona, in regard to the CO2 pipeline. I feel increasing the distance from 1/2 mile to 3,000 feet from an occupied structure, in parentheses 25.44, especially as a step in the right direction. All the ordinances are to protect the citizens of Kossuth County. I have not just jumped on the bandwagon recently because of the proposed ordinance. I have been involved in the discussions, meetings, and research for over a year now. In fact, the proposed CO2 pipeline, and in parentheses phase 2, could directly impact my daughter and her family by Norris Springs, so it is personal to me. In my opinion, these pipelines are dangerous to every living person or animal, a threat to our water supply, a threat to our land and way of life, and do nothing to enhance the public good of Iowa. It is for private gain only. That's Julie Baker. And then we received an email from, this is from Nancy Erickson. This was November 20th. I would like to submit Dr. John Abraham's testimony for the record on the pipeline ordinance for Kossuth County. Dr. John Abraham is a professor of mechanical engineering in St. Paul, Minnesota. He provided written and in-person testimony at the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission CO2 pipeline hearings. His testimony was submitted and accepted into evidence during the Iowa Utilities Board public hearing for the Summit CO2 pipeline by attorney Brian Jord. I have attached the document with testimony to this email. His testimony starts on page 24. Starting on page 29 is the information on setback distances based on his calculations. If you prefer actual link at the Iowa Utility Board website for this hearing exhibit, and it is given in the hypertext transfer protocol, secure protocol. Again, this is a lengthy testimony by Dr. John Abram. If the board would like me to read it, I certainly can. Nancy, having it submitted and being part of the hearing, is that okay with you?
That's okay with me.
Okay, is it okay with the board?
Yep. Thank you, Doug.
That is all that we've received.
There's one that came this morning.
Oh,
It's in their folder, but.
okay, I'll go ahead and read it then. This is from David Skilling, came in this morning. Please see that the following is shared at the Kossuth County Board of Supervisor meeting ordinance public hearing today. Also, please make this part of today's hearing record. Thank you. Kossuth County Supervisors. Unfortunately, we are unable to attend the public meeting regarding the zoning ordinance for carbon pipelines. As Exhibit H landowners and concerned Kossuth County residents, we strongly advocate amending the current zoning ordinance and making the restriction setbacks more stringent with regards to the distance between residences and the pipeline route. The 1.5 mile pipeline route through the area of our farmland in Cresco Township, Section 26, has approximately 10 residences within a half mile of the proposed pipeline route. Since Summit continues to refuse to publicly provide information regarding safety of the proposed pipeline and the impacted residents, it is the responsibility of the Board of Supervisors in the affected counties to ensure the safety of their constituents as well as protecting farmland and drainage. Therefore, we strongly encourage you to update the county zoning ordinance to meet today's changing world. Respectfully, David and Peg Skilling.
There was one more in the packet, from Steve and Don Bernhard. I don't know if, yep. Do you have a printed copy of that? Otherwise I have it on my computer.
I did not receive
Okay.
that.
Oh, this one I don't have it on.
Or either done.
Yep,
Okay.
yep,
Thank you. Dear Kossuth County Board of Supervisors and Auditor Eden, the Board of Supervisors is poised to take positive action for Kossuth County in creating an ordinance for potential carbon dioxide pipelines. A strong ordinance can protect Kossuth County from profit-driven private corporations and their related political supporters who wish to take advantage of government subsidies while risking the safety and encroaching upon the land of Kossuth County landowners. Attached are ordinances from both Dickinson and Emmett counties, neighboring counties, and allies for a position to protect area residents from greed and bullies. Please review these ordinances. Also attached is a checklist of suggestions proposed by the chair of the Shelby County Board of Supervisors of positive actions which may be taken to protect landowners and county taxpayers from CO2 pipeline damage. These suggestions are worthy of your review and consideration. The final attachment is an Iowa map indicating the actions which counties and cities are adopting to oppose and or create ordinances for proposed pipeline projects. This message is my personal objection to the proposed Summit Carbon Pipeline Project and to any and all CO2 pipelines proposed in Kossuth County and Iowa. Landowners deserve your support in keeping their property protected from greed and the heavy hardness of powerful corporations and individuals who express no regard for those who own, live, and cherish the land in Kossuth County. Thank you for your consideration. Heather Dawn Bernhard.
Thank you, Doug. Is there any other letters that were submitted electronically or in person that we are aware of that have not been read?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Is there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Oh, you got a couple.
Dave Wilden again. After listening to some of this, my memory's refreshed. When this initially came down the line, I had did some calculations, and there again, it's difficult to do some of these calculations because of the limited information that's available to you, especially like how much Summit has offered individual landowners for their right to go across their land. But initially, and this is when the government was going to pay them $30 up to $50 in that 12-year period per ton, and since then they've raised it to $85 to start out with. And if you read that can be adjusted to inflation. So if you figure another, say maybe 3% inflation each year for 12 years, I didn't calculate that, but I would imagine at the end of that 12 years, it's going to be up to probably over $100 per ton that they're going to collect. Anyway, initially, and this one letter here that really refreshed my memory when they're bragging about how much property taxes they're going to pay. I calculated that for every $1 that they proposed to pay to a farmer or landowner, whoever owns the land, and you had to do this by dividing it by 12 because all their income one's gonna come each year for 12 years, and they were just proposing to pay the farmer a one-time payment. But if you averaged it for 12 years, it came out roughly, and there again, this is an approximation, and I'd for sure say that, it's not gonna be exact, but I think the numbers are representative in general of where we're at. For every $1 they were gonna pay the farmer, Summit was gonna get $25. And they were gonna pay government property taxes of $8. So if that isn't about as lopsided a financial arrangement that I've ever heard of, the farmer's only gonna get $1 out of every $25 they get and every $8 that they propose to pay in property taxes. The other thing that's not accounted for in what they're saying they're gonna pay in property taxes is how much of a reduction in income tax and property taxes that the county, state, or whatever is gonna collect. How much of a reduction is gonna be there because that pipeline's going across that land. Potentially, that's gonna hurt construction of new homes, constructions of other business enterprises. If you had and there again, you're gonna have to estimate that. But that's not accounted for at all, and what they're saying, all these property taxes they're gonna pay, how much is on the other flip side of that, are the property taxes and income taxes gonna go down because of this pipeline? The other thing that always kind of peeved me, you'll hear, they'll have articles in the paper, well, we've got, I don't remember the exact numbers now, but 70% of the landowners approve of this. And they make it sound like, boy, these landowners, this is a good deal. That is about as disingenuous as anything I've ever read. How many of them landowners, if they had the opportunity to go back after reviewing all this information that's come out, would still sign up to let them do that? I'm sure there's a bunch of them that wouldn't. And then the other thing is, how many of them signed to begin with because they got that club over their head, if you don't sign, we're gonna use eminent domain on you. So how is that voluntary? That's a real stretch, consider that voluntary, that somebody volunteered to let you go across their land, considering the fact that if you didn't, we're gonna club you over the head with this eminent domain. I mean, that's about as disingenuous as anything I've ever read. That's all I got to add to it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Don?
Yeah, I'm Don Bish, and I'm going to follow up on what Mr. Weldon said. The property tax was mentioned by the company, and I did a little mental math. I don't know if it's any good anymore, but $900,000 divided by 15,000 people, residents of Kossuth County, that's $60 per person. I think my relatives, my friends, my neighbors' lives are worth a lot more than $60 per year. If that's the big factor, the tax coming in, I'll pay the extra $60 taxes for myself and my family. And the other issue I have is the green people want to see the end of fossil fuel, period. They project 2035, they want to be rid of it, 2050 for sure. If that goes through and happens, there's going to be no ethanol, period. So, there's another technology, they can do this at the ethanol plants. They don't need to be trucking this through farmland, endangering lives. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Taylor Prothman, I live in the community, and I guess I would look at it as a first responders viewpoint. This is my opinion, not of the department that I'm associated with, but I would strongly urge you to think about how many people, if you had to take an emergency response vehicle out there and it stops due to the lack of oxygen displacement, how many people could you carry on your back? Probably not very many. I'd also wonder if Summit has, how long their response would be to turn their pipeline off so that the plume would stop and you could get in to do your job, and how eager they would be to cut into their financial gain to do that. I just don't think it would be a very good idea for this in this community, as there's just not enough thought into it. You can't fix it while it's going. You can't get an excavator to dig it up. Once it's down there, it's there forever. I disagree with the entire thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Matt Dornber, if Summit's figures that were quoted earlier on the tax revenue they bring to the county were proposed by Ernst & Young, I would like you all to know that Ernst & Young was fined $100 million for violation of exams and cheating on ethics. So if that is part of your consideration, I encourage you to research that source and hold their feet to the fire and guarantee them dollars are coming to this county exactly like they proposed if that pipeline's in the ground, whether it's working or not. If it goes in the ground, the damage is done.
Thank you. Any other comments?
My name is Wade Eisenbarth. I don't know exactly. Rich, you tell me how far I actually live from the projected pipeline. The concerning thing for me is my life and my family's life and my neighbor's life. But the funny part about the whole thing is, and I think that the setback should be even maybe further until a company, a supposedly reputable company, should have a risk management plan. There should be a study. I mean, I work at Nutrien in Laverne and Irvington, and we've got a PSM and an RMP. Everybody knows what our circle is. Everybody knows what the distance is. And until that's given to the county and to the Board of Supervisors and to the people, I don't think it shouldn't be allowed at all. Anybody who wants to know what ours is, I think Irvington's is different than Laverne's. And my hazardous material is anhydrous ammonia, stored at 50 to 100 pounds of pressure in a small amount compared to what a pipeline is. Not 2100 PSI and unlimited. I don't know how far it empties. We have nitrogen valves that close every 4 foot to limit the amount of release. I don't know how that works. It seems fishy that there wouldn't be more studies and more transparency on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I didn't bring the information with me, so I don't have the figures, but there are approximately 5,000 miles of CO2 pipeline right now. And you may, I'm sure you've all heard about the Satartia incident. What you haven't heard is that there have been other incidences along those CO2 pipelines. However, where the pipelines are currently located in Texas and Mississippi and New Mexico, there are no people. So those incidents didn't make the news because nobody was injured, nobody was hurt, because they're in remote locations. That's not the truth for Kossuth County. That's not the truth for Algona. We are running a pipeline through a populated area. And so you can't base it on the current 5,000 miles of CO2 pipeline that's running in a remote location. It's not the same in Iowa that it is in New Mexico and Texas and Mississippi. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Doug, could I ask you to read page 29 of Dr. Abraham's testimony as it pertains to setback distances as he found in his plume, or his engineer study, I mean?
Excuse me, Chair. I'm not sure the numbering on this is.
Maybe it's not the same on there.
Do you have that there? Is it, I'm looking at the Schultz Trust hearing.
If you go in the package.
Page 67 of 85 is at the top. I mean, there are a lot of setback distances that are mentioned in this.
That's trying, I think. Yep, here it is. Okay. You want a Schultz exhibit? Here it is, Carter. Or you got the same thing?
Okay. Yeah, so it'd be these two pages. Three, starting here.
What are your opinions? I mean, starting at what are your opinions?
If you could start. Well, I wonder if it would be appropriate to.
It's probably important to take the whole document into consideration and not read one or two lines.
Well, should we start at the section of number 9, or it is a lengthy. I would like to read the.
You would like everything read?
If that would be all right.
Okay, this is, my understanding was filed with the Iowa Utilities Board on November 1 of 2023, and this is, from what I understand, testimony by John Abraham before the Public Utilities Commission of the state of South Dakota in the matter of the application by SCS Carbon Transport LLC for a permit to construct a carbon dioxide transmission pipeline. That file in South Dakota was HP 22-001, Dr. John Abraham, sub-rebuttal testimony in support of landowner interveners. Please state your name, position, and business address. Answer: my name is John Abraham. I'm a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of St. Thomas, 2115 Summit Avenue, St. Paul, Minnesota 55105. Question: have you previously submitted testimony in this proceeding? Answer: yes. I submitted direct testimony dated June 16, 2023 on behalf of landowners interveners. Question 3: to whose testimony are you responding in rebuttal? Answer: I am responding to the July 7th, 2023 rebuttal testimony of James Powell. Question 4: please summarize your testimony. Answer: at page 2, line 8 through page 3, line 34 of his rebuttal testimony, Mr. Powell suggests risk modeling is not a necessary variable when making hazardous pipeline siting decisions. I disagree with this presumption. It is also important to understand what type of risk modeling was used, and all of the inputs and outputs must be shared with the Commission at a minimum to assist in evaluation of Summit's proposed route in each county, as that route location relates to the Commission's analysis of the 49-41B-22 factors, namely to the threats of injury posed to the environment or social and economic condition of current and future inhabitants, as well as whether approval of the proposed route will substantially impair the health, safety, or welfare of the inhabitants. At page 3, line 37 of his rebuttal testimony, Mr. Powell states that the dispersion modeling completed by SCS should not be used by the Commission to establish setback requirements. My opinion is that he is answering the wrong question, and it is misleading to conclude as he did. Question 5, please address the concerns you raised above relative to risk modeling as a tool to inform location decision-making relative to Summit's hazardous pipeline application. Answer: there are PHMSA, and PHMSA is Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, minimum level risk assessments for HCAs, and then there's the Commission's task of essentially determining if the proposed hazardous pipeline route is an intelligent one that satisfies all of the 49-41B-22 factors. It is my opinion these two facts are not mutually exclusive. It is my opinion the Commission should absolutely require disclosure of any and all risk analysis Summit prepared or had prepared for this project, including but not limited to precisely what type of inputs were used in its Canary dispersion model and overland flow modeling, the values of each input used, proof they modeled worst case scenarios and not just at federally determined HCAs, but near other sensitive areas as well, and all outputs and derived from such modeling. To date, I have not seen nor am I aware of any outputs being produced by Summit relative to risk modeling other than this sole statement by Mr. Powell. SCS has determined within the approximately 35/100ths of a mile of direct effect population, I guess I should have, Mr. Powell said, and this is part of his sentence, they don't have the introduction part of it. SCS has determined within the approximately 35/100ths miles of direct effect population HCAs, and then ... more sentence. Powell rebuttal, page 2, line 25-26. What we learned from the Navigator PUC hearing is that Navigator's non-worst case scenario risk modeling for an 8-inch pipeline showed a hazard distance of 1,855 feet at 40,000 part per million concentration of CO2, and in parentheses see N68 from Navigator docket. For Mr. Powell's to reference 35/100ths of a mile of risk, or 1,848 feet, are we to presume that that is a corollary to the Navigator data, or is it Summit suggesting 1,848 feet is the hazard distance also for a 24-inch pipeline? This is unclear, given Mr. Powell's claims that the HCAs they identified were all near the proposed emitter ethanol plants, and if we can rely on Summit's publicly available map shown below. and in parentheses, see project footprint, Southern Carbon Solutions, and click on the South Dakota map. And then another parentheses, last accessed August 31, 2023. Then the pipeline size at the location of each South Dakota ethanol plant is 6 inches, not 8 inches, and certainly not 24 inches. This leads us to believe that the hazard distance for a 6-inch CO2 pipeline, according to Summit, is 1,848 feet. But what is the hazard distance for the bulk of the proposed route in South Dakota, which is a 24-inch diameter pipe? We don't know because they don't tell us. But even if they told us, a static number in feet would still be insufficient until we have the full analysis and study to determine the veracity and reliability of Summit's claims of 3,500 miles or 1,848 feet. We should also be provided the risk data associated with a much larger 24-inch pipe. Question 6. What are your opinions about Summit using canary dispersion modeling? The answer, first and foremost, we aren't presented with modeling assumptions, and poor modeling assumptions result in poor modeling results. But even if we were to presume all the correct assumptions and inputs were used in Summit's canary dispersion model, Canary has several limitations. Canary is modeling made available through Quest Consultants. See Canary by Quest Consultants. This webpage generally discusses Canary, and as you scroll to the bottom of the page, it says next section, computational fluid dynamics, in parentheses CFD. When you go to Quest Consultants webpage on CFD, see CFD Quest Consultants, you see this statement. In some situations, the simplifying assumptions made with practical modeling solutions do not apply. In these cases, detailed analysis is needed. The techniques of computational fluid dynamics, CFD in parentheses, are required to find solutions to complex problems where other simpler models are not appropriate. For these situations, we turn to CFD, and then in parentheses, bold in original. I agree with this statement. Practical modeling solutions like Canary have their place, but it is not sufficient to obtain a complete picture of the risks presented. My overarching point is the people of South Dakota and the Commission need to know, deserve to know, the true worst-case scenarios posed by Summit's proposed 6-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, and 24-inch diameter CO2 pipeline. While you need not model every foot of the proposed route, it is critical, in my view, to perform CFD modeling at a handful of sensitive locations. It is also wise to select the areas of CFD not only based upon the federally determined HCAs, but also by considering future or likely land uses in and near the proposed project footprint. Question 7, please expand on your prior comment that Mr. Powell was perhaps answering the wrong question as it pertains to using dispersion modeling to establish setbacks. The answer, this is along the lines of my testimony immediately above. I am not aware that the Commission is necessarily being asked to establish setbacks per se, or to directly route the pipeline. My understanding is they are to determine the viability of Summit's application by applying the applicable law. So the question is posed to Mr. Powell at page 3, lines 35 to 36, when using the phrase setback requirements, could be taken literally or generally. My opinion is utilizing the best available and most comprehensive modeling. CFD is what South Dakota deserve, and the Commission should expect of Summit when asking the Commission to vote on the route proposed. Given the Commission is not directly determined setbacks per se, I think the question posed to Mr. Powell and his denial could be misleading. Dispersion modeling absolutely should inform the Commission's ultimate decision on whether or not Summit has met its burden of proof. Question 8, does your prior answer also generally apply in response to the question posed to Mr. Powell in his testimony on page 3, line 60? Answer, yes, generally, but when considering appropriate setback distances, or more precisely whether Summit's proposed pipeline location is reasonable, you have to have good handle on the detailed inputs and outputs of the risk modeling, which I have not seen and am not aware that Summit has shared. Question 9, given that Summit has not shared detailed inputs and outputs related to risk modeling, yet claims the only risk is at 3,500 miles in isolated areas, I have 2 hypotheticals I would like you to consider. For hypothetical number 1, please assume the following input variables in terms of rendering CO2 dispersion and hazard opinions. Outer diameter pipeline in inches, 8 and 625 thousandths inches. Wall thickness in inches, 277 thousandths inches. Pipeline length in miles. Distance between shutoff valves, in parentheses, 20 miles. Molecules, CO2. Depth of soil cover in feet, 5 feet. Soil type mixed. Release calculation method average between 0 to 20 seconds. Release direction vertical. CO2 release rate in pounds per second would be 1,428 pounds per second. Atmospheric temperature in Fahrenheit, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Atmospheric stability class F, and in parentheses stable. Wind speed in miles per hour, 3.3 miles per hour. Then considering hypothetical number 1 related to the 8 and 625 thousandths inch diameter CO2 pipeline, did you form opinions as to the likely distance human CO2 exposure could occur at a hazard level of 30,000 part per million and at a hazard level of 40,000 part per million? His answer was, yes, I did. Are those opinions based upon your education, background, training, and experience after taking into consideration the hypothetical inputs posed to you? And his answer was yes. Do you hold your opinions to a reasonable degree of professional certainty in the field of engineering? Answer, yes. Question 12, what are your opinions? Answer, it is my opinion that should a release occur as described, considering the variables in hypothetical number 1 above, that human exposure at 30,000 parts per million of CO2 would more likely than not occur at a distance greater than 2,600 feet from the site of the release of CO2, and that human exposure at 40,000 parts per million of CO2 would more likely than not occur at a distance greater than 1,850 feet from the site of the release of CO2. Question 13, for hypothetical number 2, please assume the following input variables in terms of rendering CO2 dispersion and hazard options. Outer diameter pipeline in inches is 20 inches. Wall thickness in inches, 535 thousandths inches. Pipeline length in miles. Distance between shutoff valves, 20 miles. Molecules, CO2. Depth of soil cover in feet, 5 feet. Soil type mixed. Release calculation method average between 0 to 20 seconds. Release direction vertical. CO2 release rate in pounds per second, 10,320 pounds per second. Atmospheric temperature in Fahrenheit, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Atmospheric stability class F, and in parentheses stable. Wind speed 3.3 miles per hour. Then considering hypothetical number 2 related to the 20-inch diameter CO2 pipeline, did you form opinions as to the likely distance human CO2 exposure could occur at a hazard level of 30,000 parts per million and at a hazard level of 40,000 parts per million? Answer, yes, I did. Are those opinions based on your education, background, training, and experience after taking into consideration the hypothetical inputs posed to you? Answer, yes. Do you hold your opinions to a reasonable degree of professional certainty in the field of engineering? Answer, yes. What are your opinions? The answer is It is my opinion that should a release occur as described, considering the variables in hypothetical number 2 above, that human exposure at 30,000 part per million of CO2 would more likely than not occur at a distance of 4,000 feet from the site of the release of CO2, and that human exposure at 40,000 part per million of CO2 would more likely than not occur at a distance of 2,800 feet from the site of the release of the CO2. When you say that exposure of CO2 could be experienced by humans at a level of 40,000 part per million at 2,800 feet from the site of the release, what do you mean? Answer: I mean that a person located at 2,800 feet in any direction from the specified location of the CO2 release from the 20-inch diameter CO2 pipeline and utilizing the inputs provided in that example would more likely than not experience CO2 exposure levels of 40,000 parts per million should the inputs utilized cause the plume to travel toward the location of such a person. To be clear, neither the plume nor the CO2 exposure levels discussed will be present everywhere at a 2,800 foot radius. 2,800 foot radius, 360 degrees from the release point, but simply that a person in harm's way of the plume travel would likely experience these CO2 levels at 2,800 feet away from the release point given the inputs provided. For your opinions given above to each of the two hypotheticals, do you believe those distances are the worst case scenario for the 8-inch and 20-inch pipelines respectively? The answer is no. My opinions are based on the assumptions provided, which are not necessarily worst case assumptions or inputs. Would you expect a release from a 24-inch diameter pipeline to reach a greater distance for the exposure levels discussed above than a 20-inch pipeline? The answer, assuming all other inputs are equal and you are simply increasing the volume of CO2 that could release under a similar event, then yes. More likely than not, the increased volume escaping from a 24-inch diameter pipeline, all other factors being equal, would have the likelihood of traveling a further distance than a similar release from a 20-inch diameter pipeline. And question 20, have all your opinions expressed herein been given to a reasonable degree of scientific, professional certainty and been informed by your education, training, background, and experience? Answer, yes, they have, and I reserve the right to amend or modify these opinions upon presentation of additional information that may justify such a change, if any. And that's Dr. John Abraham.
Thank you, Doug. Sorry to have you read that all, but I felt that was necessary.
Is there any other comments from the public?
Based on what Doug just said, I encourage you guys to obtain the emergency response plan, plume model study from Summit today, or pass the ordinance as written.
I just got one more thing to say. And this is not relative to any of these figures and stuff. Personally, I served in a hazardous military situation. I watched them ice down bodies of young people that were killed. And I'd like you to think, how many veterans that own property are gonna be affected by this? And do you want to reward them by allowing Summit to run that pipeline within a few hundred feet of their home after they maybe survived something like I did and came back to this community and contributed to this community for many years? I know that has nothing to do with any of these facts and figures and stuff, but it's a personal thing that I think should also be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further comments from the public or the board?
My name is Rochelle Fox. I'm just a concerned citizen as far as like emergency response from things like this. Do you think our community is ready for something like that, or the morgue, or staff of mental health counselors to deal with the public on such a tragic scale? That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan Lubenthal again. I have one question for each of you board members, and that is, what is stopping you from passing this ordinance? What is the holdup? Why wouldn't you want this? For you, your family, and the citizens of this community, I just don't understand why you would not want that. And if there is a why not, I think the citizens of this community would like to know what those reasons are.
Thank you. We have a couple others.
I would like to point out that Dr. Abrams does say these are not worst case scenario. And if you notice, they chose an atmospheric temperature of 90 degrees. I did my studies at an atmospheric temperature of 40 degrees, which is much more realistic for this area. It doesn't get up to 90 very often here. And the lower temperature does affect the dispersion.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your service. And my two sons, one is served in the Navy, I have one in the Air Force, and I have a daughter that's in Army Reserve. And we're going to build, I'm not, but the community, with the organization is the new Veterans Center that will be between Algona and this pipeline, and it's in a low spot. And so I take your words to heart, because I watched what my kids have done, my father, uncle, and they deserve the best. And that is not a good situation, and so please consider that.
Thank you. Any further public comments? Going once, going twice. If there are no further public comments, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Roger. We have a motion on the floor to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion at hand to close the public hearing? Roll call vote, please.
Black,
Yes.
Jerks.
Yes.
Wactor,
Yes.
Nath,
Yes.
Stecker.
Yes. Motion carried unanimous. Next up is discussion decision for approving the first reading of the proposed amendment to the county zoning ordinance that addresses the carbon pipeline. Would there be any motions to that effect?
It's right here.
Mr. Tappan, or
Yes.
Roger? What would your motion be?
To approve the reading.
Okay. To approve the first reading as the motion was prepared here? Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion?
If I could ask a couple questions of the pipeline company themselves before voting on this, but will you provide us a safety plan or a plume model today?
Summit will not provide a
plume at this time.
And what size of pipe will be running through Kossuth County? Do you have that determined?
Yes, I'd say it's mainly determined at this time.
And what would that size be?
Up to 24 inches per the easement.
Okay, so it will be a 24-inch pipe then going through the county, should the project?
Not necessarily. The easement allows up for that 24,
Okay.
but it's purely going to be sized for the volume that's available.
So anywhere between, what would the smallest
I think the smallest pipe
that you would run through Kossuth County?
Again, the smallest will be a 6-inch, but that's ideally not going to be the case.
Sure. More than likely a 20 to 24-inch pipe.
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion from the board? I would request a roll call vote here for the motion at hand.
Platt,
Yes.
Jerks.
Yes.
Wactor,
Yes.
Nah,
Yes.
Stecker.
Yes. Motion carried unanimously. Is there any further action we need for this public hearing? Just brought the sheet. Is there anything else that you know we need for further action, Doug?
Not at this time. If you'd like to discuss a second consideration, may or may not be appropriate, I don't know.
Okay. Do we need that on the agenda specifically to set a time and date for a second consideration?
You'll want that on the agenda because you'll be making a decision, yes.
Okay. Would it be the pleasure of the board to have that on next week's agenda to set time and date for a second consideration?
It would be.
Okay. Can we put that on the agenda?
Will you do a,
Do you want what place you want it at? Do you want that in the motion?
We can't decide that today. We would decide that next week.
It's not a public hearing or anything, it's just a consideration. So, public hearing has been taken care of.
So we can address that then. Thank you everyone for coming and speaking.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
I forgot that's this week.